Hello everyone, my name is Kimberly Gonzalez and this is my course project. Okay, so to start, let's take a look at what is biodiversity. Simply put, biodiversity is the variety of life in the world or in a particular habitat or ecosystem. In other words, biodiversity is the variety of species which inhabit the earth alongside of us. A forest lacking in biodiversity may be overrun by, let's say, deer and not many other animals, while a forest rich in biodiversity is teeming with life, whether that be predators and prey alike, insect, mammals, everything. However, recently, biodiversity has been decreasing more and more over time, not just in specific areas, but all over the world. This is due to a variety of combining issues. Some of the main ones, however, are pollution, overdevelopment, and agriculture. All these things go hand in hand with habitat destruction. As the human population rises, so do these issues, as a growing demand for food and housing becomes prevalent. In this course project, we will be diving into just a fraction of biodiversity loss that is happening in Florida and how the state can try to make some amends. In Florida, there are 7 species of seagrass, all of which make up about 2.2 million current acres of these beds along the coast. This is more than any state, making this the most extensive seagrass bed in North America. Aside from the loss of biodiversity within the seagrass species, the success of these grasses greatly impact a number of marine mammals, reptiles, fish, and even invertebrates. Manatees are one of the easiest indicator species to mention, as they heavily rely on the seagrass beds. Manatees need about 100 pounds of vegetation a day, and Florida is a very important destination in their migration. Manatees are now being forced to travel to other locations to find food, basically choosing between freezing to death or starving to death. Another indicator species to mention are seahorses. Seahorses are very fragile animals with averages of 100 to 1,000 fry. Think of this, that many babies and only less than 0.5 of them make it to adulthood. Less and less seahorses are being found in the Florida seagrasses, indicating that the habitat has become unfit for several species. Because seahorses need to be eating constantly, a thriving population also indicates the population of several other species, which they consider prey. These grasses are being highly affected by eutrophication, which is an excess of nutrients, and irresponsible boating. Restoring the grasses, depending on the species, can take months or even years. Florida soil is naturally rich in nitrogen and phosphorus, so when people fertilize their lawns with extra amounts of these nutrients, the overload that is washed away by rain and erosion causes mass algal blooms to happen. These blooms disrupt water clarity, and begin to weaken the vital seagrass beds to the point of death. In order to help, limiting boating areas should be implemented. As boating scarring is one of the most common causes of seagrass decline, the erosion of boat propellers break the seagrass blades and can even leave trails of barren sand. These areas may sometimes become too bare to support the growth of the seagrass beds, leaving behind literal scars. Another thing is to promote Florida homeowners and associations to grow native lawns, which in turn reduce the levels of fertilizing needed. This also leads me to another point, which is better regulating fertilizer sales. Certain counties in Florida prohibit fertilizer use between June and September. However, all stores are still allowed to sell fertilizers through these months. To better understand why fertilizer use impacts Florida's wildlife, let's take a look at this ecological framework. Let's begin with negative impacts. First, as mentioned before, most if not all fertilizer gets washed away by rains, which happen very often here in Florida. This is not only a waste of money, but it's also negatively impacting our waterways. Excessive nutrients cause algal blooms, which in turn cause seagrasses to die due to lack of sunlight, cloudy waters, and reduced dissolved oxygen in the water. This in turn causes several species of fish and marine invertebrates to both die from lack of oxygen and habitat destruction, and it also begins to starve the manatees, which need at least 100 pounds of seagrass a day to survive. The killing off of these species, plus the low water quality, also reduces ecotourism, as Florida is known for its amazing clear and pristine beaches. Reduced ecotourism means less money being given to national parks and the federal government. Halting the funding to conservation efforts. All this results in a decrease of biodiversity. On the proper use side, not only do we need to stop buying fertilizer, but we also can begin to plant native landscapes. Stopping the use of these nutrients, plus opting for slow-release fertilizer if you really need it, is necessary because it stops runoff from occurring. Therefore, algae has a harder time establishing itself. The clear water in turn supports the regrowth of seagrasses, maintaining manatees and other native wildlife. The bounce back of these amazing species will increase ecotourism once again, as many of these animals are a tourist attraction, such as seahorses, sea turtles, and several species of beautiful fish. Increased ecotourism once again increases funds to national parks and also funds conservation. In terms of management practices, let's first take a look at some case studies which indicate what needs to be done. This first case study focuses on the effects of eutrophication on 2 different seagrass species. They tested the results of an increase in nitrogen and phosphorus on the productivity, biomass, and epiphyte percentage on the seagrasses. Attached blade epiphytes and species of mat-forming macroalgae covered the seagrasses and reduced light visibility, plus it led to a decrease in dissolved oxygen from the lack of photosynthesis by the seagrasses, especially during the warmer seasons. If you don't know, warm water holds less oxygen. Phytoplankton biomass, also due to eutrophication, added a lack of water clarity as well. This case study was made to understand the necessary levels of nutrients needed in the water column to keep the seagrasses healthy, and to also help understand what management practices have to be put in place. It was unanimous that the removal of nitrogen and phosphorus from the water is of the most importance, and also one of the most cost-effective ways of mediating the issue. Natural ways of removal would yield better results, and the removal of nutrients in the form of sludge could be contained to specifically created ponds. In our next case study, the researchers were trying to find a sustainable way to protect the seagrass beds that are already here. They proposed laying down different biodegradable lattice structures and plant seagrasses in each plot to protect new shoots and promote expanding growth. Some structures were also layered to protect from hydrodynamic activities. Certain plots were even placed down without any extra planted seagrass to act as a control. In the end of the day, only 2 stacked lattice structures was successful in protecting the new seagrasses. At first, there was a decline in new shoot production, but this is most likely just due to the transplant stress. Within 2 months, the double-stacked plots increased by over 50%. So overall, it was concluded that this method would be highly effective in areas with limited hydrodynamic activity and erosion. Biodegradable fabrics could also be laid down on propeller scars to prevent additional erosion. Small plot areas could benefit from the use of these structures as it prevents herbivory as well as gives extra support to new growth. I think that both of these case studies were very well executed as it can give useful information for these issues. Research like this paves the way for better management practices in the future. I believe that if they can manage to filter nitrogen out of the water, as they mentioned in the first case study, that would be best course of action and help sustain growth long term. I think that case 2 is great for short term as it can further protect our current populations of seagrass and promote the expansion of the beds. Another thing I think that counties should look into doing is repairing septic tanks. Leakage from septic tanks are also a pushing factor in eutrophication levels, and while it can be expensive to repair them, it should definitely be taken into account. Current proposed management practices are for replanting and reducing the use of fertilizer, as well as finding a way for nitrogen removal. The thing with replanting is that if the issue of excess nutrients in the water column isn't resolved first, the new plants that are going to be going in are not going to make it. So I truly believe that the best way for the public of Florida to begin, the best way that we can start to mitigate this issue is for the public of Florida to begin understanding how to fertilize properly. The reduction of eutrophication impacts will lessen over time as long as no extra nitrogen or phosphorus keeps being added into our waterways. For my swag initiative, I thought I could design a few different pins to give out, let's say at farmers markets or hand out in gift shops for science centers, just to help give these places that help our ecosystem a bit of extra funding. So I thought of 3 different designs. One would be a of a manatee, a seahorse, and a green sea turtle, as well as giving out a note with these pins. The note would say, "Seagrass beds are home to a huge biodiversity of marine creatures." It isn't spoken about much, but the dying of these seagrass beds is one of the leading causes to manatee population loss, as well as these animals eat 100 pounds of vegetation a day. On top of being a large food source for several animals, seagrass beds provide shelter for fish, including rays and baby sharks, invertebrates, and even marine reptiles like turtles and snakes. If you would like to help out these marine habitats, the two most important things to do are to follow responsible boating limits and laws, and to learn how to fertilize your lawn properly in Florida. Thank you for listening to my presentation. For further information, please feel free to visit FWC, or you can contact them by sending them an email through their Q&A page. There is no specific email, so if you send it through there, they will respond to you with the correct department. If you live in Florida, also be sure to check your county's policy regarding seagrass bed restoration and look to see if there's any volunteer opportunities that you can go and help out with. These are my sources, and thank you for listening.